Apple had just released M4, M4 Pro, and M4 Max chips for the iMac, MacBook Pro, and Mac Mini. If you have watched any of my previous Mac testing videos, you know that for music production, a new chip or a chip with more cores didn't necessarily mean it would give you better performance depending on which DAW or digital audio workstation you use due to different levels of core utilization. Is that still the case with the new M4 chips? Well, in the past week, I did some extensive tests comparing how 7 different DAWs performed on the new 12-core M4 Pro MacBook Pro, which I have it here, very shiny, the 12-core M3 Pro MacBook Pro, the 10-core M2 Pro MacBook Pro, and the 10-core M1 Pro MacBook Pro. So it's basically the battle of the pro chips for music production. I'll be covering 3 different tests today. One is a test with an amp simulator plugin at 1024 buffer size. The other one is a test with a synth, Massive X at 64 buffer size. And the last one is a super CPU intensive mixing into a mastering chain test with tons of plugins and buzzes involved. My goal is to provide you with some empirical benchmark data that's specifically for music production so you can make an informed decision on which Mac might give you the most bang for your buck. So all the tests were done at least 10 times and under the exact same conditions to ensure repeatability. So there's no one-off occurrences. Also, I'm not trying to show that one DAW is better than the other. I firmly believe that the best DAW is the one that works for you, and you should not change your DAW just because it cannot use efficiency cores. As usual, detailed timestamps are in the description. Before we dive in, I know many of you asked for more tests last time. I hear ya. I'm already in the process of doing more tests so you can expect more videos on the M4 Max, including the base M4 Mac Mini. It's just simply way too much info to put in this one single video. Thank you all for your support for my channel. You're the reason I'm able to afford this Mac this year for testing, despite running such a small channel. And if you would like me to continue making these videos, consider subscribing and liking and sharing this video. It really helps a lot. I also put together a frequently asked questions section in the pinned comment and the video description because there were a lot of recurring questions and criticism in my M3 Pro testing video. I think some of those will pop up again for this video, so please be sure to give that a read. The 14-inch MacBook Pro I got has the 12-core M4 Pro chip with 24 GB of unifying memory, or I'm just going to call it RAM because it's less syllables, and 512 GB of SSD. This is basically the most affordable MacBook Pro with a Pro chip in the M4 lineup. The 4 generations of Pro chips all have very different performance core to efficiency core ratio. The 12-core M4 Pro chip has 8 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. The 12-core M3 Pro chip has 6 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores. The 10-core M2 Pro chip has 6 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. And lastly, the 10-core M1 Pro has 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores. By the way, this 10-core M1 Pro chip has the exact same CPU as the M1 Max chip. The latter just has more GPU cores. Because audio processing typically doesn't use GPU cores, the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips are interchangeable in this video's context. Out of the 4 Pro chips, the M1 Pro has the highest performance core to efficiency core ratio, and this does have a significant impact on DAW performance in real-life scenario, as I'll show you in this video. For the multi-core utilization test with an MSIM, I first put a stereo 44.1 kHz guitar DI recording on a track. Then I put an Apple Silicon native MSIM, NeuroDSP Gojira X, on the track, set it to stereo mode, and then I duplicated the track with the plugin as many times as possible until I heard crackling in the playback or saw a CPU overload pop-up when I tried to play all the tracks back at the same time. I would then delete one track, hit play to see if the DAW could play back smoothly. If so, I would note down the track count. If not, I would keep deleting tracks until the DAW could play back smoothly and then note down the track count. So the track counts I will show you represent the maximum CPU power you can get with a specific DAW on a specific chip with this specific plugin. So the actual track count numbers don't matter. They're merely there to show performance differences because as soon as you change any of the variables, like using a mono audio file instead of stereo, you could be getting way more or way less tracks. So focus on the differences, but not the actual track count. All the DAW projects were in 44.1 kHz and set to 64-bit summing. Buffer size is 1024 samples for this first test, but I'll be testing 64 buffer for Massive X later in this video. Remember that these are not scientific tests by any means. I've done the best I can to ensure accuracy, but you shouldn't take what I said or anyone says on the internet as gospel. Let's start with Reaper, one of the most optimized DAW on Apple Silicon Macs as shown in my previous videos. Here are the audio configurations. You'll notice that I have the anticipative FX processing on and set the CPU usage to aggressive. Some consider this cheating, but in my opinion, the fact that a DAW has features to get extra performance out of the CPU should 100% be taken into account because in real world, why wouldn't you enable these settings, right? It's okay if you disagree, but this is my rationale because I'm trying to get results based on how people would actually use the DAW in real life. As usual, the CPU monitor shows that Reaper is able to harness both the efficiency cores and performance cores to the absolute limit. It's the only DAW where all the core's activities are filled to the brim, so to speak. On both the M1 Pro and M2 Pro, Reaper could handle about the same 66 to 67 tracks before the audio started to crackle. On the M3 Pro, it's 88 tracks, which makes sense because it has 2 more cores that Reaper can use, and the cores have much faster clock speed. On the M4 Pro, Reaper could handle 117 tracks, which is a huge leap from the M1 Pro and M2 Pro chips. Respectively, it's a 77% performance increase from the M1 Pro and 74% increase from the M2 Pro. The jump is less for the M3 Pro, which is a 33% increase. If you're liking this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate your support. Next is the newly released Cubase 14, and these are the audio configurations. Just like Reaper, I set ASIO guard level to high because it allows Cubase to do more processing. You can see here that Cubase's performance on all 4 chips are very similar to Reaper's. The differences are so minimal that they could well just be margins of error. Looking at the CPU monitor, you can see that all the cores are fully utilized. Though there seemed to be just a tiny bit of space at the top, so maybe that's why Cubase could run just a few less tracks compared to Reaper. I'm not a computer engineer, so I don't know if that's actually how it works, but the takeaway here is that Cubase can fully harness the power of all the cores on the new M4 Pro chip. Moving on to Pro Tools. In my M3 Pro review video, Pro Tools were not able to use the efficiency cores at all, but they have since updated it and is supposed to be able to use the efficiency cores now. People on Reddit actually noticed a performance boost since the update, once again proving that my tests do reflect real-life usage. Looking at the CPU monitor this time, sure enough, the efficiency cores are pretty much maxed out. I don't know what's going on with the 2 idling E cores in the M3 Pro chip. I tried different plugins, reinstalling Pro Tools and rebooting the computer, and they were still like this. I would assume there's some kind of bug, and this is probably why Pro Tools could handle less tracks only on the M3 Pro compared to Reaper and Cubase, but performed similarly to Reaper and Cubase on every other chip. The 4 efficiency cores on the M4 Pro also don't look as maxed out as they did in Reaper's test, but maybe it just needs an update. Either way, compared to Pro Tools efficiency cores utilization from last year, it's really clear that the current version is able to harness the E cores to process audio. And thanks to this, Pro Tools now gives you performance that's similar to Cubase and Reaper. Let's turn our attention to Logic Pro 11, Apple's own DAW. Here are the audio configurations, and yes, both processing thread and processing range are set to maximum. On the M4 Pro, Logic could handle 99 tracks. On the M3 Pro, 63 tracks. On the M2 Pro, 52 tracks. And on the M1 Pro, 61 tracks. Logic's performance on all 4 chips is noticeably reduced compared to Reaper, Cubase, and Pro Tools. To understand why, we just need to take a look at the CPU monitor. We can see that Logic is not using any of the efficiency cores in any of the chips. For the 12-core M3 Pro chip, this means that half of the cores on a chip are not being used to process audio, and as a result, Logic's performance on the M3 Pro is now similar to that on the M1 Pro. This also means that a Logic user going from the 12-core M3 Pro to the 12-core M4 Pro will experience a big boost in performance of 57%, but for a Reaper user, it will be a smaller jump of 33% as I mentioned earlier. A Logic user upgrading from the 10-core M2 Pro to the 12-core M4 Pro will most likely experience the biggest performance boost of 90%, at least for audio processing. Okay, in case you think that using the automatic setting, like here, will actually make Logic use efficiency cores. It actually won't. It will make it worse. Like right now, it's not even using this performance core or this one. I just changed the processing threads to maximum 12 again from automatic, and immediately you can see that all the performance cores are being used again. And this is the exact same track count, 84, as before. Now, many people commented saying that it's crazy that Apple's own DAW isn't optimized on their own chips. I'm pretty convinced that they did this on purpose. Apple is known to do things in very specific ways sometimes, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had the philosophy that the efficiency cores should only be used for light tasks and not power tasks. Maybe this is their definition of optimize. Who knows? And you may agree with that. That's fine by me, but what I'm trying to show here is that whether or not a DAW can fully max out the efficiency cores does make a difference in how much you can do in the DAW, so you do need to keep this in mind as a Logic user when choosing your Mac. Let's take a look at Ableton Live 12, and here are the audio configurations. Looking at the test results, you might notice that it's slightly worse than Logic, but the overall pattern is exactly the same, with M4 Pro significantly outpacing the rest, M2 Pro doing the worst, and M1 Pro and M3 Pro doing more or less the same. For a Live 12 user, going from the 12-core M2 Pro to the 12-core M4 Pro may give you a 100% increase in performance, which should be a pretty huge upgrade. Looking at the CPU monitor here, the story is the same as Logic. The efficiency cores are not used at all, and it's why the overall pattern is the same as Logic's. Next up is FL Studio 2024, and here are the audio configurations. Just like my test last year, the CPU monitor shows that FL Studio is able to use both efficiency cores and performance cores. Though the audio would start to crackle, even though you can see there are still more resources available. It seems that despite being able to use all the cores, FL Studio somehow doesn't perform as well as Reaper, Cubase, or Pro Tools on all 4 chips. This was exactly what happened with FL Studio 21 in my M3 Pro testing video from last year. I don't know why, but I also don't think I did something wrong in my testing. There are some advanced settings that you can tweak in the plugin settings window. I did try out all the settings and I wasn't able to get any better results. Last one for this test is Studio One 7, and here are the audio configurations. Studio One has the worst performance on the M4 Pro chip out of all 7 DAWs, with it only being able to handle 84 tracks before the audio started to crackle. It's an 8% decrease in performance compared to the second worst performance, which is FL Studio's 92 tracks, and a 28% decrease in performance compared to the best performance, which is Reaper's 117 tracks. Looking at the CPU monitor, we can see that some strange things are happening with how Studio One is using the cores. First of all, the efficiency cores are not being used, but for the M4 Pro chip, 2 of the performance cores are doing some really strange things. Whatever they're doing, I would presume that they're not processing the audio, precisely because of the much lower track count. It's like the M4 Pro was operating with 2 less cores. Yes, I did reinstall Studio One, restart the computer, and this still happened every time. I'm guessing it's also not an issue in this specific MSIM plugin because it worked totally fine in other DAWs. But also, when I did the same test with Native Instruments Massive X in Studio One, the CPU cores were also doing some bizarre things. Whoa, what is going on with Studio One 7? There's a whole performance core here that's unused, and the audio is already crackling and popping. And what is with that? Like, there's a dip here, and there are 2 peaks here. Secondly, you can also see that a performance core in the M1 Pro chip is idling like an efficiency core. I mentioned this exact same issue in Studio One 6 in my M3 Pro video last year. Is it just a bug or is it something bigger? Or does it only happen on this specific M1 Pro machine of mine? I have no idea, but all I know is that Studio One may have some core utilization issues on Apple Silicon chips. Using the same method but with a 64 buffer size for low latency, I repeated the test with Massive X on the track instead of Newer DSP Gojira, and the audio file was replaced with MIDI. In Massive X, I used the Apricot Pop preset from the factory presets. Here are how the 7 DAWs performed in this test. For the most part, it's the same story as the MSIM test. For the DAWs that can fully use both efficiency cores and performance cores, M4 Pro took the lead, followed by M3 Pro, and M2 Pro and M1 Pro performed similarly, with M2 Pro just slightly worse. Probably because of the lower performance core to efficiency core ratio compared to the M1 Pro. Cubase managed to dethrone Reaper on the M4 Pro, M3 Pro, and M1 Pro in this test, though just by a hair. Now, something's going on with FL Studio and Studio One. Both seem to really struggled, specifically on the M4 Pro chip under 64 buffer. Wow. The CPU is not even being fully used. Not even the performance cores. It's only at like 50% and is crackling like crazy. At least on my end, these results were repeatable, meaning I could quit and relaunch the DAWs, reinstall the DAWs, and reboot the computer, and I would still get these results. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to put a big asterisk here because I'm inclined to believe that there's a glitch of some sort on my end, and these two test results probably don't represent the two DAWs' actual performance in this chip in this test. To create a test project that's more like a real-world mixing scenario, where many buses are involved for processing a group of tracks, and also there are plugins on the master bus. This is a routing diagram of a fake mixing session I created in each DAW. What you're seeing here is that I have 5 individual tracks, each has 7 different plugins on them, and I'll show you the plugin settings in a bit. And the 5 tracks are then routed to a bus that has a compressor on it. This is to mimic the common practice of bus processing in mixing, like a drum bus. Then the bus is routed to the master, which has a whole mastering chain, including a mastering grade maximizer. The test is to see how many times I can duplicate this entire bus group before the DAW is overloaded. If you do any mixing, you know exactly what I'm trying to create here. So here's what I did in Logic as an example, but it's the same across all 7 DAWs. I put a stereo audio file on a track, and then I inserted Pro Q3, the new Neutron 5 transient shaper with 3 bands and precise mode engaged, Pro C2, which is a compressor, Gem EQ 550, Saturn 2 with 3 bands and superior oversampling, Timeless 3, which is a delayed, and Pro R, which is a reverb. This is a pretty typical vocal plugin chain for me. Basically, there's EQ, compression, saturation, delay, and reverb. On the bus track, I put the FET compressor by Softube. Finally, on the master bus, I have Softube's tape plugin, Ozone 11's dynamic EQ, compressor, exciter with 4 bands, imager with 4 bands, Submission Audio's Flatline 2, which is a clipper, with 4 times oversampling, and finally, I have the Ozone 11 maximizer in IRC4 mode, which is the most CPU intensive mode. And I also turned on soft clipping and transient emphasis. So this is really intense on the CPU. Because we're testing a mixing scenario, buffer size was set to 1024. Here are how all 7 DAWs performed in this test. Once again, it's the exact same story as the previous 2 tests, and this is exactly why I believe that the MSIM test alone is sufficient to show how each DAW performs on the chips in all kinds of real-world usage. Reaper took the lead as usual, and all the DAWs performed much better on the M4 Pro chip. FL Studio has the worst performance of all. It could handle 8 less bus groups compared to Reaper on the M4 Pro chip. Remember, one bus group contains 43 plugins and 6 tracks. That is including the bus track. So it was actually a difference of 288 plugins and 48 tracks. To help you better visualize the test results on the M4 Pro chip, here's a map showing you the routing and the tracks in the test session, and you can really see the performance difference among all the DAWs. If I put Reaper together with the 2 worst performing DAWs in this test, the magnitude of the performance differences is pretty astonishing. So this is the 10th bus group that is created, and you can hear that there's a lot of popping and crackling. Clearly it's overloading Studio One 7, but if you look at the CPU history here, the efficiency cores are not used, and there's some really weird looking charts here for the performance cores. It doesn't look like how the other DAWs use the CPU, so I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so what are the key takeaways here? Well, first of all, if you are on a previous generation Pro chip and your Mac struggles with some of your audio processing work, which exclude the use of sample libraries, by the way, because that's mostly about RAM, the M4 Pro chip is going to be a noticeable upgrade, regardless of which DAW you use. However, users coming from the M1 Pro, M1 Max, and the M2 Pro will get much more of a performance boost than those coming from the M3 Pro. Only if your DAW can fully use the efficiency cores like Cubase, Reaper, Pro Tools, and even FL Studio. Obviously, if your current Mac is having no issues handling your projects whatsoever, then you won't experience any difference if you upgrade, and that's why I wouldn't recommend upgrading in this case. You should fight the fear of missing out and use your money wisely. Or do whatever you want, right? Who am I to tell you what to do? The second takeaway is that the core utilization of a DAW continues to have a significant impact on how much performance the DAW can get out of an Apple Silicon chip. And whether you agree with the practice or not, efficiency cores can be maxed out to handle music production tasks. As of the making of this video, Reaper, Cubase 14, and Pro Tools can all fully use the efficiency cores, while Logic Pro 11, Ableton Live 12, and Studio One 7 cannot. FL Studio 2024 can use the E cores too, but it doesn't seem to be able to max out any of the cores. Now, any of these DAWs could be updated to use efficiency cores at any moment, just like Pro Tools did, so just be aware that this piece of information here could be outdated. If I know of any such updates, I'll definitely put it in the comments or in the description. The third takeaway is that when you're shopping for a new Mac for music production, you should always take into account the chip's efficiency core to performance core ratio. Now, how do you find that information? It's quite hidden because you don't see it in the configuration page. You'll need to go to Apple's website, find the Mac you want, so I'll click MacBook Pro here, and now we're on the product webpage. Then scroll down until you see the top banner pop up, and then you click Tech Specs. And down here in the chip section, it will tell you how many efficiency cores and performance cores there are in a specific chip. If you want a more visual comparison, you can check out my M4 chips analysis video where I created motion graphics to visually compare the core distribution of each M4 chip. So to answer the biggest question, should I upgrade to M4 Pro? I would say yes if your current Mac is struggling with your current projects. If not, there's no need, don't upgrade. That's it for this video. I'll be making more videos to talk about fan noise, thermal throttling, the base M4 Mac Mini, and potentially even more DAWs. So be sure to subscribe if you're interested. Give this video a like if you find it helpful. It really helps support the channel. Happy creating, and I'll see you next time.